The 2020 storm chasing season started out quickly as a surprise tornado-warned storm caught us in Columbus, Ohio on our way to the plains. The storm did produce a confirmed tornado, but all I got were the eerie sirens in the aftermath. 40 hours later, we were in beautiful, picturesque Wyoming, waiting for storms to form in a very remote and beautiful part of the country. You could see for miles, and nothing but cattle ranches were in the area. Here's the storms forming over the Stampede Saloon and Eatery in the town of Chugwater, followed by a closer shot of the storm as rain began to fall and the storm began to rotate. The downside to chasing in Wyoming, despite its beauty, is the sparse road network. Here we are going down a butte, which is a very cool feature that I've never seen before until visiting Wyoming. Eventually this got us to a flat area. You can see another storm chaser I ended up meeting up with in front of me. The storm's kind of right overhead at this point. We moved a little bit away from the storm, and as you can see, it clearly wasn't going to produce a tornado, but it became a quite beautiful storm. We followed it to the north, stayed out ahead of it. Here's us getting finally to a paved road, and the storm continues to just kind of move parallel to us. It's moving straight north at this point. It was quite a beautiful storm, and here's kind of a look right in front of one of those cattle ranches I mentioned. Just a few cattle in a huge, huge field, and it really was a sight to see. You can see the whale's mouth from under the shelf cloud. Here's a few of the stills. There it is over, I think, the town of Torrington. I'm not sure. There are a bunch of small towns we went through. There's a cool shot of it over the cattle. And that was it. The next day, we began our day in the Rocky Mountains in Colorado. We had a little bit of time to kill. That's the town of Estes Park. And there's an elk on the way out. Not even moving. It was real, though. A few hours later, we were in eastern Colorado in the flatlands, ready for storms to initiate. There's a cumulus deck forming just east of Fort Morgan, Colorado. And a little bit after that, these storms began to finally initiate as the cumulus began to tower and get darker on their undersides. At this point, it decided to hail, so I decided to pull over and just wait for the storm to move out of the way a little bit. Last thing I wanted was a cracked windshield. A little bit of hail. So the storm remained very high base, but it produced some large hail and a lot of cloud-to-ground lightning. Here's a few shots I got, including this one, which is probably the best picture I took in the entire storm chase trip. Just beautiful. After the lightning show, I headed back to a town to find a truck stop to get some sleep, and I saw a coyote or some sort of dog. I think a coyote on the side of the road. I saw a few coyotes in Wyoming. Saw a lot of wildlife on the trip, actually. Foxes, coyotes, elk, snakes, you name it, it was all there. Here we are the next day in Kansas, another cumulus deck. If you look real close, you can see a little whirlwind right there in the cornfield. That was pretty cool to see. Here we are approaching a set of rising cumulus that's about to fire off some cells. This day would go on to be the absolute best day of the year, and the day that pretty much made the chases worth going. Cell is just south of Syracuse, Kansas. Starting to become a massive anvil. rotation on radar, and I can already see a little bit of a base, maybe even a tip of lowering on it. We have ourselves a lot of chasers. They're all here, which means I'm in the right spot. This storm has been beautiful. We have a observed tornado to our west. I'm not sure if it's a land spout or an actual tornado, but it's 30 minutes away, so it's going to ask a lot for it to hold on time. But we can chase this. We can go west on that one, and then come back east and get this one. It will move to the north, but there's plenty of roads to the north that we'll be able to take. So heading west back to Colorado. Just starting to be able to make out the wall cloud. Still about 20 miles to our west. But the good thing about the open plains is you don't need to be close. All you need to do is be within 15 miles, and more often than not, you're going to see what's there. Snake in the middle of the road. We got snakes and tornadoes at the same time. Wow, was that beautiful though. Wind just suddenly picked up immensely, and there's no massive funnel, but it started hitting, and all the storm chasers started running. So that was quite a nervous moment for me. The funnel cloud right above me and the wind suddenly picked up very quickly. There's a lot of dust getting kicked up. A few chasers reported it as a tornado. From what I could tell, it was just downdraft kicking it up. So I was very close to being a tornado. That was definitely a tornado-ish thing, but I wasn't able to say that that was one. If it was one, it technically got where I was, and the wind field started hitting me. But again, I think it was just downdraft. The funnel cloud was, not completely circulating down to the ground. Here's a few more time lapses of it. It was quite a crazy storm, probably my most nervous moment of the chase, definitely the most exciting moment of the chase. Here it is a little bit later. This is just scud. It looks like a funnel, but it's just scud. There's all the storm chasers escaping. That was a pretty incredible moment. Just, the storm is moving at 2 miles an hour, so we just kind of let it follow us down Highway 36 for a period of an hour and a half. Really incredible. But I see all the chasers escaping now, which means it's going to be my time to get out of here as well. Let's go. think I can let the beauty of these storms speak for themselves. This thing was a monster. It was as if the gods were coming down and saying hello, and you were just standing there next to something much, much larger than yourself. That's what it felt like being next to that storm. Here's another storm to the south. This thing was 49 miles away. I think it produced a brief tornado. Didn't see it, but there were some good pictures taken of that one by some other photographers who were down there. I wish I would have been there. There's another one in the storm. Here's a clear funnel cloud. It never reached the ground, but you can see it on the bottom right there. Clearly starting to be a funnel cloud. There's just another one of it coming in over a wheat field. And probably the most beautiful one of that one right there. An incredibly beautiful storm over Kansas. That song is called Drive Under the Moon by Pecos Hank, who's a storm chaser, YouTuber, and musician. My absolute favorite storm chaser on YouTube. I listened to his music a lot on my storm chasing trip. I only felt it was appropriate to include it. As you can see, the first supercell wasn't going to produce a tornado. We headed into one of the many, many small towns in southwest Kansas and kind of just watched some lightning for a little bit, and then decided to head south as the main storm got closer. Here we are driving south, just next to it, racing to get away from it and towards the storm, so you can just begin to make out to their south. There's the view on radar. We're getting swallowed up by the main storm, so we're racing to get south of that and head on to the southern storms. And what you'll see in a second here is the most amazing lightning show I have ever seen. None of the clips are sped up. It's all in real time. It was constant flickers.
Let's take a drive under the moon.
Kansas pictures and videos, the more incredible I realized it was. There's people that have chased for years and say that's one of the most amazing storms they've ever seen, which is especially incredible because it didn't even produce any definite tornadoes. Here we are in Oklahoma the next day, a large anvil developing towards southeast. This day was a tough forecast. I kind of waited around all day deciding what to do, and you know, I almost head down to Texas. I thought it was just a bit too far, and I wanted to be set up to get to Illinois the next day. Here's a large wall cloud. We ended up following that to a sunset set of mammatus clouds, which just looked absolutely incredible and beautiful. I mean, that's some of the strongest mammatus as of that point that I had ever seen before, so quite beautiful. Here we are heading into the Ozark Mountains where we chased. I didn't really get many pictures of this one. There's a large supercell with a perfect hook echo on radar that went behind one of the ridgelines, actually where I'm driving right now, but I was on the other side of the mountains, so I couldn't tell if it was a wedge tornado or a wall cloud. Drove back on that road and didn't see any damage. I don't think any tornado was confirmed. There's another storm chaser's truck who I met up with. When I say met up with these storm chasers, I mean just happened to meet them on the road. That's what's great about storm chasing. You meet a lot of cool people. Here we are next day heading through Missouri and then eventually into Illinois for what was the last chase day of the first time out of the year. There's some, again, cumulus clouds building. As if you can't tell the trend, the anvils pop up and then the storms kind of form under them. So we're following this one up towards almost near Chicago. As you can see, the storm's got a bit of a base on it, and once again we moved in and the chase was on. it weakened a little, and then it's up again. It's kind of right in that front area behind those trees, but it's moving like east northeast. So I've like looked at roads up ahead, and the best thing we can do is just keep pushing east because the rain is so wrapped around it that it's hard to see. So.
Hey, what's your name?
Andrew.
Brad.
Nice to meet you.
What up, Max? Yeah, you gotta come in
So that's me meeting another chaser who I've since become friends with. There's a beautiful shot of a train coming right behind that storm. You can see the wall cloud. That's one of my favorite pictures from the whole chase. This chase ended up taking us all the way into the suburbs of Chicago. Here we are at a Walmart in, I think, Schaumburg, which is one of the farthest suburbs of Chicago. But it got impossible to chase at this point. This little bit was tornado warned, but the rotation had weakened by the time it got to me. So that was kind of it. We went back home to Ohio after that for about 2 weeks because the forecast was just terrible. 2020 was actually the worst year ever for storms. This is just footage of a small little storm that came through where I live in southeast Ohio. Brought a little bit of winds and a nice little shelf cloud with it. Nothing special, but you know, when it's that close to you, you might as well go chase it anyway. You only had to drive 10 minutes for that one. Here's another storm that came in a little bit later. Believe it or not, it had almost a little bit of rotation on it, quite interestingly enough. And some scud, which appeared to almost have some eddies of rotation on it as well. That was pretty interesting, as it was, I mean, I literally took this video from my, parking lot of my apartment. This was taken off my deck. That's a nice downburst that came in, about 60-mile-an-hour winds that had a little bit of damage. There were some small tree branches that fell down, so that was pretty fun. A few weeks later, we were back out on the plains. Here we are in South Dakota. I didn't document this one as well in terms of videos. I really wish I had. This was the second craziest storm of the entire, well, definitely the craziest storm, the second most beautiful storm of the entire year. The next chain of events are absolutely wild what happens. It turned into a derecho, so a long line of straight winds, no tornado threat, so I thought. Here's the storm coming in, absolutely gorgeous. This is one of my favorite pictures I took all year. And then things got crazy. Here's a panorama of the storm. As you can see on the map, all the red dots are storm chasers. We're trying to escape this thing. We were driving insanely fast, but unfortunately it caught us. And I came across this. Here's the winds hitting us so hard I had to park into them. Maybe 100-mile-an-hour winds. I mean, I conferred with other storm chasers. We thought at least 85, 90-mile-an-hour winds. Just battering my car. You can see that other camper van, which is flipped upside down. It turns out a brief tornado had formed out in front of the squall line, which can sometimes happen. They're weak tornadoes, but still enough to flip this camper van, which had 4 children and their mother inside. Luckily, they were all unharmed, and it was just a few camping stuff that was destroyed. So, you know, hopefully nothing that insurance can't cover. They're very lucky to be unharmed, but we ended up taking them to Pierre, South Dakota, where they were able to get a hotel and then eventually get back home to Texas. That was the craziest moment of the whole chase. This was later that night. I had a duck. Thought it was going to move, so I didn't swerve. And, yeah, that was kind of unfortunate. Felt bad for the thing. Did a little damage to my car as well. Here we are the next day, though, in Minnesota, back on the chase. I really wish I would have had more videos from that South Dakota event, because that was just a insane storm and insane thing that happened. But we just crossed the border from North Dakota to Minnesota here. I'm not really sure which way I wanted to go. Decided to go south on this road. Ended up turning around. And the hard thing about this chase was we were about 8 miles from the Canadian border at this point. Here's a bit of a time lapse of the storm. A lot of eddies of rotation on this one. And here's a bit of a time lapse of us heading towards it. You can see kind of a broad base on this storm. It's not really forming a wall cloud yet. It would eventually, though, as we got closer and closer to the storm. I love that shot of me reacting to the storm. It's pretty cool when you come over a ridgeline of trees and you can see an immense wall cloud like that. This is a cool time lapse because it shows the storm actually dying. You can see the clouds. You can see a really good inflow band behind this one, but despite the inflow, eventually it was cut off from a storm behind it, which kind of just mixed with it and it cut off the wind patterns. Unfortunately, this thing slowly dies. I set up my camera to try to get some great shots, and unfortunately it didn't do it. Believe it or not, as it moved forward, it actually strengthened again, surprisingly, and got a tornado warning on it, but I had decided to head south towards some other storms that they didn't do anything either. Unfortunately, I didn't see a tornado at all the entire year. Not that that spoils what's left in the video, but still pretty cool to see wall clouds like this, and yeah, look at that, it just dies pretty instantly. There's me getting some pictures. Pretty exciting to see myself out in the field again after all the time doing it. There's the best one I got, though. That was right when it was still a real peak wall cloud. What a beautiful storm. That's one of the most beautiful storms of the year, to be honest. And there's the deer. They were out. Luckily for them, they weren't going to get hit by a tornado tonight. So that ended our chase night in Minnesota. Here we are the next day along the South Dakota-Nebraska border, heading south to chase another supercell. Luckily, this one wasn't going to grow upscale as much. That was seemingly the problem with most of the storms this year. Here's a cloud that looked like Jesus. This was my most liked tweet of the storm chasing season. Gotta love that. And here's my absolute favorite time lapse of the year. This is just incredible. Here's a beautiful storm, a beautiful supercell storm coming in northern Nebraska, about to cross the border into South Dakota, and you can just see this thing intensifying as it gets north. I really thought it was going to produce a tornado. I mean, I was 100% sure this thing was going to be a tornado, because you see it develop a wall cloud, maybe even a brief funnel if you watch this back enough times. I mean, it was really close. Unfortunately, another storm kind of cut it off from the back, and it kind of moved out of the favorable air as it moved north, so that's disappointing. But it was an incredible storm. One thing that you can't tell from the video is how many mosquitoes there were and how bad the pollen was. I was sneezing for the week straight, and the mosquitoes, oh my goodness, each of my legs probably had about 30 bites each by the time this second trip was done. It wasn't bad on the first trip, but the second one was more in the summer, and of course, you know, Minnesota and the Dakotas are quite famous, for, especially Minnesota, for their awful mosquitoes. But here we are just watching the storm come in. At this point, you know, I kind of just, it was the same as what happened in Kansas. This thing was moving a little bit faster, though, and unfortunately there was no straight north road because of a river. So there I am grabbing a few still shots. There's the best one that I got. As you can see, the wall cloud had gone away. It became just a shelf cloud at that point. Here we are in the town of Monowee, Nebraska, population 1, watching a beautiful lightning show. Not quite as good as the one in Kansas, but there it is. So we flash forward to the next day, our last day of chasing for the year, and we are on the Kansas-Nebraska border, just above the northern half of the border in Nebraska is where we started, went down to Kansas, ended up in a couple states in this one. There we are looking at some eddies of rotation right above us. We got pretty close to some eddies of rotation up here in this next clip. So yeah, that storm did nothing. This is a moment where I kicked myself. Here's us in Kansas now chasing another cell about 50 miles east. This thing put down a very, very, very brief and very, very weak tornado. It was spotted by a few other chasers, but I was being indecisive of where to get to. Had I been on it maybe on time, I would have seen it. Here it is crossing the river into Missouri. We ended up chasing it for quite a while, but unfortunately it didn't quite do anything, and then it started getting dark, so that kind of did it. I spent the next few days hanging around Iowa, visited a friend, explored the Amish country. Haven't chased in Iowa yet. It's one of the few states I have not chased in now. Texas being the other one. That's like the big one that I didn't chase in, despite the fact that it's the state with not the most tornadoes per square mile, but the most tornadoes overall. Little time less of us chasing. I think Tempest Tours was on the right, or one of the tours. The next day, storms were in Ohio and Pennsylvania. It was out of my range. As I said, I stayed in Iowa. My mom ended up getting this video, though, of the storms coming in. Pretty good wind gust, maybe 65 miles an hour with this one, as it went through just north of Pittsburgh. So that was pretty cool. That's what I missed out on. But that's it, guys. Here we are, just waiting for the train to go by in Iowa. That was pretty much the sights of the last few days before we headed home. So we had a fantastic trip. I really enjoyed my first season out on the plains. No tornadoes, but I mean, this is considered maybe the worst year in storm chasing history, and this is still what I saw. So I can't even imagine what next year is going to bring. That's it for this video, though, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you want to see more. And for now, we'll see you guys next time. I'll be posting more stuff if we get some more storms later in the summer in Ohio or Indiana or Western PA, but we'll see. You never know. But that's going to be it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed the storm chasing video of 2020. Peace.